During the coronavirus pandemic, the UK had a lot of taxpayers' money wasted or stolen, allegedly. Well, things are no different than it was in the United States of America. AP News has an article here about how billions of COVID-19 relief aid was stolen or wasted. We're going to dive right into it, guys. Let's go. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, guys, wherever you are in the world. This is REGANELITE here with an article here from AP News about how billions in COVID-19 relief aid was stolen or wasted. The Great Grift, as they like to call it. Yeah, it's been a bit interesting to see from America's perspective how money was handled during their coronavirus pandemic. So let's dive into it, guys. So, much of the theft was brazen, even simple. Fraudsters used the social security numbers of dead people and federal prisoners to get unemployment checks. Cheaters collected those benefiting in multiple states, and federal loan applicants weren't cross-checked against the Treasury Department database that would have raised red flags about sketchy borrowers. Criminals and gangs grabbed the money, but so did a US soldier in Georgia, the pastures of defunct church in Texas, a former state lawyer in Missouri, and a roofing contractor in Montana. All of it led to the greatest grift in US history, with thieves plundering billions of dollars in federal COVID-19 relief aid intended to combat the worst pandemic in a century and to stabilize an economy in free fall. The Associated Press analysis found that fraudsters potentially stole more than $280 billion in COVID-19 relief funding. Another $123 billion was wasted or misspent. Combined, the loss represents 10% of the $4.2 trillion the US government had so far disbursed in coronavirus relief aid. That's insane. $4.2 trillion, guys. That's an insane amount of money. Obviously, America has one of the largest, them and China are the biggest economies in the world. But when you look at that money, 280 billion in just relief funding alone, and 123 billion wasted, it feels like it's just such poor mismanagement. And the Trump administration really needs to, they really messed up badly, really, on it when you think about it. That number is certain to grow. It's going to grow. It's even bigger, guys. That number is certain to grow as investigators dig deeper into thousands of potential schemes. I'm laughing because it's if you can't laugh, guys, you're only just going to cry about it, really, because that's the only way you can think about these things. It's easy to get angry. It's easy to get angry at these things, and sometimes I do show a little bit of temperament when I read certain stories, but on this one, I just feel like what a surprise, it shouldn't surprise anyone. Anyway, back to it. How could so much be stolen? Investigation outside experts say the government, in seeking to quickly spend trillions in relief aid, conducted too little oversight during the pandemic's early stages and instituted too few restrictions on applicants. In short, they said the grift was way too easy. Here was this sort of endless pot of money that anyone could access, said Dan Futcher, chief of the fraud and white-collar crime at the US Attorney Office in the Eastern District of Washington. Folks kind of fooled themselves into thinking that it was a socially acceptable thing to do, even thought it wasn't legal. The US government was charged more than 2,230 defendants with pandemic relief fraud claims and is conducting thousands of investigations. Most of the loot money was swiped from 3 large pandemic relief initiatives launched during the Trump administration and inherited by President Joe Biden. Those programs were designed to help small businesses and unemployed workers survive the economic upheaval caused by the pandemic. The pilfering was wide, but not always as deep as the eye-catching headlines about cases involved many millions of dollars. But all the theft, big and small, illustrates an epidemic of scams and swindles at a time America was grappling with overrun hospitals, school closures, and shuttered businesses. Since the pandemic began in early 2020, more than 1.13 million people in the US had died from COVID-19, according to the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention. So obviously there's been a lot of I want to be very clear, obviously there's a lot of questions about COVID-19, about some of its there's been a lot of people who are reluctant to take the vaccine because they didn't believe it made a difference. I mean, at this point, I don't know. But looking back on it, we just don't know the answers, really, to be fair. It's easy to say in hindsight, maybe we should have done nothing, or maybe we should have just let things run. But 1.13 million people in the US have died from COVID-19, according to their disease control and prevention. But we don't know. If we don't know for certain, we can only go by what they're saying, so it's be mindful is what I would say when you read something like that, because there has been a lot of misinformation around COVID-19. So I'd say just take it with a pinch of salt, I would say. Michael Howard-Russ, the US Justice Department Inspector General, who chairs the Federal Pandemic Response Accountability Committee, told Congress the fraud is clearly in the tens of billions of dollars and may eventually exceed $100 billion. Howard-Russ told the AP he was sticking with that estimate, but won't be certain about the number until he gets more solid data. I'm hesitant to get too far on how much it is, he said, but clearly it's substantial, and the final accounting is still at least a couple of years away. Mike Gallows, the US Justice Department Acting Director of COVID-19 Fraud Enforcement, said, "It is an unprecedented amount of fraud. Before leaving office, former President Donald Trump approved emergency aid measures totaling $3.2 trillion, according to figures from the Pandemic Response Accountability Committee. Biden's 2021 American Rescue Plan authorized the spending of another $1.9 trillion. About a fifth of the $5.2 trillion has yet to be paid out, according to the committee's most recent accounting. Never has so much federal emergency aid been injected into the US economy so quickly. The largest rescue package in American history," US Comptroller General G. Darwell told Congress. It's a huge amount of money to go straight into an economy, even one as titanic as America's. It's absolutely humongous. The enormous scale of the package obscured multi-billion-dollar mistakes. An $837 billion IRS program, for example, succeeded 99% of the time in getting economic stimulus checks for proper taxpayers, according to the news agency. Nevertheless, that 1% failure rate translated into nearly $8 billion going into ineligible individuals, a Treasury Department Inspector General told AP. An IRS spokesperson said that the agency did not agree with all the figures cited by the watchdog, and noted that, even if correct, the loss represented a tiny fraction of the program's budget. The health crisis thrust the Small Business Administration, an agency that typically gets a little attention, into unprecedented role. In the 7 decades before the pandemic struck, for example, the SBA had doled out $67 billion in disaster loan. God, this is quite huge, to be fair, guys. So how COVID relief was allocated. So it says here, the federal government approved more than $5 trillion during the COVID-19 pandemic, intended for people, governments and businesses disrupted by the emergency. So here they just categorize a little bit here for us to look at. So they have individuals, and it includes stimulus checks, rental and homeowner assistance, rural housing, SNAP, WHIC. That's $1.15 trillion there. In unemployment, pandemic unemployment aid received just over $1 trillion. Paycheck protection payback, so loans for small businesses for payroll, rent and utility costs. That was estimated to be $778 billion. State, local and tribal governments, that's coronavirus relief funds, state and local fiscal recovery funds, FMEA disaster relief and childcare grants, that's $674 billion. And healthcare provider relief fund, vaccines, substance abuse and mental health services, federal employee health and nursery homes, R&D, that's research and department, $351.36 billion there. Huge numbers, obviously, to go into the economy. Absolutely humongous. When the pandemic struck, the agency was assigned to manage 2 massive relief efforts, the COVID-19 Economic Injury Disaster Loan and Paycheck Protection Program, which will swell more than $1 trillion. SBA workforce had to get money out the door fast and help struggling businesses and their employees. COVID-19 pushed SBA pace from a walk into an Olympic sprint. Between March 2020 and the end of July 2020, the agency granted 3.2 million COVID-19 Economic Injury Disaster Loans totaling $169 billion. According to an SBA Inspectors General report, while at the same time implementing a huge new Paycheck Protection Program. In the haste, the grudge rails to protect federal money was dropped. Prospects borrowers were allowed to self-certify in that their loan applicants were true. The CARES Act also barred the SBA from looking at tax return transcripts that could have weeded out shady or undeserving applicants, a decision eventually reversed at the end of 2020. So yeah, they dropped a lot of, they kind of relieved the pressure off those for people needing it. And obviously loopholes were gained, obviously. If you open up a bank window and say, give me your application and just promise me you really are who you say you are, you attract a lot of fraudsters, and that's what's happened here, Housebridge said. The SBA's Inspector General Office estimated fraud in the COVID-19 Economic Injury Disaster Loan Program at $86 billion and the Paycheck Protection Program at $20 billion. The watchdog is expected in coming weeks to revise all lost figures and are likely to be much higher. In an interview, SBA Inspector General Hannibal Mike Ware declined to say what the new fraud estimate for both programs will be like. Probably a lot. It will be a figure that's fair, that is 1000% deferable, made by office. Like I said, guys, if you can't laugh, you're only going to cry. Fully backed by a significant criminal investigative activities that is taking place in that space, Ware said. Ware and his staff are overwhelmed with pandemic relief audits and investigations. The office has a backlog of more than 80,000 actions leading to 80,000 actions leading to close to 100 years worth of work. God, 100 years. That's not going to get done in time, is it? Death by 1,000 cuts might be death by 1,000 cuts for them, Housebridge said of Ware workload. It's just the magnitude of it, the enormity of it. It is absolutely enormous. Close to 100 years worth of work, guys. We'll be long gone by that's done. A 2022 study from the University of Texas at Austin found almost 5 times as many suspicious paycheck protection loans at the $20 billion SBA's Inspector General has reported so far. The research, led by finance professor John Griffin, found as much as $117 billion in questionable and possibly fraudulent loans, citing indicators such as non-registered businesses and multiple loans to the same address. Housebridge, the pandemic's watchdog chairman, criticised the government's failure to use the Do Not Pay Treasury Department database, designed to keep government money from going into the debarred contractors, fugitives or felons or people convicted for tax fraud. Those reviews, he said, could have been done quickly. It is a false narrative that has been set out that there are only 2 choices, Housebridge said. One choice is to get the money out right away, and the other choice was to spend weeks and months trying to figure out who was entitled to it. In less than a few days, at week's most, Housebridge said the SBA might have discovered thousands of eligible programs. 24 hours, 48 hours. Would that have really upended the program? Housebridge said, I don't think it would have. And I think the data sitting there, it didn't get checked. No, it didn't get checked. But sometimes you panic in these situations. Did the Trump administration panic? No, they tried to dismiss it, didn't they? Just like Johnson's government. Look where that got them. The Biden administration do put in place stricter rules to stem pandemic fraud, including the use of Do Not Pay database. Biden also recently proposed a $1.6 billion to boost law enforcement efforts to go after pandemic relief fraudsters. Excuse me. I think the bottom line is, regardless of what the number is, it emulates overwhelmingly from 3 programs that were designed to originate in 2020 with too many large holes that opened the door to criminal fraud. Guy Spensling, the White House American Rescue Plans coordinator, said in an interview, "We came into the office with the largest amount of fraud. We were already out of the barns," Berlin added. In a statement, the SBA spokesman declined to say whether the agency agrees with the figures issued by Ware's office, saying the federal government has not developed an accepted system for assessing fraud in the government's program. Previous analysis have pointed to potential fraud or fraud indicators in a manner that convoys those numbers as true fraud estimates when they are not, according to the statement. The coronavirus pandemic plunged the US economy into a short but devastating recession. Jobless rates soared into double digits, and Washington sent hundreds of billions of dollars to states to help the sudden unemployed. For crooks, it was like tossing chum into the sea to lure fish. Many of these state unemployed agencies used antique computer systems or had too few staff to stop bogus claims from being paid. Yes, these states were overwhelmed in terms of demand, said Brett Pardon, Acting Assistant Secretary of the US Labor Department, Employment and Trading Administration. We had not seen a spike like this ever in a global event like a pandemic. The systems were underfunded, they were not resilient, and I would say more importantly, they were vulnerable to sophisticated attack by fraudsters. Fraud in pandemic unemployment assistance program stands at 76 billion, according to the congressional testimony from the Labour Department Inspector General Larry Turner. That's a conservative estimate. Another 115 billion mistakenly went to people who should not have received the benefit, according to their testimony. It's just a huge amount of money, according to all these analyses, just going out the window, disappearing. Huge amount of money of fraud here. You know, we thought in the UK, the amount of money, 37 billion on a test and trace system we had in the UK that was wasted. The numbers are astonishing. Of course, economy-wise, is America's grand style, but it's just staggering amount of money just going like that. It's just insane, guys. Turner declines AP request for an interview. I wonder why. Turner's task in identifying all the pandemic unemployment insurance fraud had been complicated by a lack of cooperation from the Federal Bureau of Prisons. According to September's alert memo issued by his office, scam artists used social security numbers and federal prisons to steal millions of dollars in benefits. His office didn't know exactly how much was wiped that way. The Prison Bureau had declined to provide current data about federal prisoners. The agency did not respond to a request for comment. I don't blame them. Ohio State Auditor Keith Faber saw trouble coming when safeguards to ensure the unemployment aid only went to people who legitimately qualified were lowered, making conditions ripe for fraud and waste. The state unemployment agency took controls down on the one hand. They were drinking from a fire hose, Faber said. They had a year's worth of claims in a couple of weeks. The second part of the problem was the federal government directed them to get the money out the door as quickly as possible and less worry about security. They took that to heart, and I think that was a mistake. Was it a mistake? Was it a mistake, though? I don't know. I mean, to say less about security, I mean, people need to make ends meet. We need to get the money to them. I don't know if that was a mistake or not. I think, in some situations you've got to kind of just like, look, they need the money, let's go, sort of thing. But I digress. Ohio's Department of Job and Family Services reported in February's $1 billion in fraudulent pandemic unemployment claims, another $4.8 billion in overpayments. The oblivious masks that became a symbol of the COVID-19 pandemic are seen on fewer and fewer faces. Hospitalizations for the viruses have steadily declined, according to the CDC data, and Biden ended the national emergency response to the pandemic. But on a politically divided Capitol Hill, lawmakers have not put the pandemic behind them and are engaged in fierce debate over the success of the relief spending and who to blame for the theft. Too much government money, Republican argues, breeds fraud, waste and inflation. Democrats have countered all the financial muscle from Washington saves lives, businesses and jobs. Republicans and Democrats did, however, find common ground last year on bills to give federal government more time to catch fraudsters. Biden in August signed legislation to increase the statute of limitations from 5 to 10 years on crimes involving two major programs managed by the SBA. The extra time will help federal prosecutors untangle federal pandemic fraud cases, which often involve identity theft and crook overseas, but there's no guarantee that they'll catch everyone who jumped at the chance for easy payday. They're busy too with crimes unrelated to pandemic relief funds. They're not going to catch all that money, guys. They're just not. We know they're not going to get all that money back. It's like the same in America, in the UK. It's going to be the same it wouldn't surprise me if this happened in one or two other nations as well. It's just not going to happen, guys. Do we have enough cases that lead to them doing them in 2030? We absolutely could. So Fraudster, the federal prosecutor in the Eastern District of Washington. But my experience tells me there likely will be other priorities that will come up and will need to be addressed. And unfortunately in our office we don't have a dedicated pandemic fraud unit. Well, you should do. I don't know why you don't have one. Congress has yet to pass a measure that would give prosecutors the additional 5 years to go after unemployment fraudsters. The worry in Turner, the Labour Department watchdog, without the extension he told Congress in a late May report. People who stole the benefits may escape justice. Spurring, the White House official said any further crisis that requires government intervention doesn't have to be a choice between helping people in need and stopping fraudsters. The prevention strategy going forward is that in a crisis you can focus on fast delivery to people in desperate situations without feeling that you can only get that speed by taking down common sense and anti-fraud guardrails, he said. Fascinating to say the least, guys. Obviously, we don't know for 100% certain. Obviously, the federal government has denied some of these numbers, as we've read in there. But you know, America is obviously a very difficult and complex and toxic system as it is. But to have so much money, we're talking trillions and trillions of American dollars going out of the system, some of it out of the country. I just don't see them recovering all of it. I mean, they said it's going to take up to 100 years, yeah, on some of it. It's just not going to happen, guys. But everyone should be asking themselves, could things have been done better, you know, when it comes to what happened back then. But what do you guys think? Are you guys surprised by these numbers? Because I am. I think the numbers are I wasn't expecting numbers to be this high, but I guess they are. So what do you guys think? Let me know down in the comments below. Let me know what you think of AP News and the analysis on this, guys. I'm curious to know what you guys think. Like, share, and subscribe as always, guys. And I will catch you guys. Oh, let me just get this out. And I will catch you guys very, very soon. Thanks for watching.